Think about the exact moment when a new piece of technology goes from being just this fun novelty like something you play around with on a lazy Sunday to an actual existential threat.
Right, the kind of shift that makes Fortune 500 CEOs wake up in a cold sweat.
Exactly. And for artificial intelligence, that transition wasn't, some gradual 10-year evolution. It happened in this remarkably compressed, almost violent window, the winter of 2022 and 2023, right after ChatGPT launched into the world.
Yeah, that's when everything just sort of flipped.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission for you today is to really cut through the sci-fi hype and figure out exactly how the biggest technology companies on the planet, and actually entire nations, radically changed their strategies overnight.
Because it really is a modern arms race, I mean, in every sense of the word. And the sheer panic of that specific moment in time is just palpable when you look at the documentation.
We have a massive stack of source material on the table today. We're talking leaked corporate memos, quarter-end financial reports, and some pretty dense technical white papers.
Very dense.
Yeah. And we're going to synthesize all of it to map out what is clearly the defining business and geopolitical competition of our era. But to understand why everyone was scrambling so hard, okay, let's unpack this. We have to start by looking at the undisputed king of the hill at the time. We have to look at Google.
Right. And it's crucial to establish that Google wasn't just some casual participant in the AI space who got caught off guard. I mean, they were the pioneer.
They pretty much built the foundation, right?
Exactly. They built the foundation that almost everything else in this race relies on. The technical papers in our stack outline just a staggering track record. Google researchers literally invented the transformer architecture.
No, I see that term constantly. It's the T in ChatGPT. But what does that actually mean for someone who, isn't a computer scientist?
Think of it like reading a book. Older AI models processed language word by word, just sequentially.
Oh.
It was slow, and the AI would often just forget the beginning of a sentence by the time it reached the end. But the transformer architecture totally changed the game by allowing the system to look at an entire sentence or even a whole paragraph all at once.
Oh, wow. So it's taking it all in together.
Yeah, it understands the context of every word in relation to every other word simultaneously. There's a massive leap in how machines actually comprehend human language.
So they basically taught the machine how to read for context rather than just decoding a dictionary word by word.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And they didn't stop there. They built BERT, which was a model that set records across all these language comprehension benchmarks.
Right.
They created AlphaGo, which defeated the world champion at Go. And experts thought that was still decades away. Plus, they developed AlphaFold, which essentially solved one of the absolute hardest structural problems in biology, predicting how proteins fold.
So in every meaningful scientific metric, Google was miles ahead of the pack.
Miles ahead.
But having the most brilliant research lab in the world is not the same thing as having the product that the average person actually uses. And reading through these internal memos, that kind of leads to the core dilemma Google faced.
The incumbent's dilemma.
Yeah. It's like inventing the most powerful, revolutionary engine in the world, a literal warp drive, but you keep it hidden in your garage because your company is currently making billions of dollars every single quarter selling bicycles. You don't want to release the warp drive if it means people stop buying your bikes.
And that bicycle they were selling, which is Google's core search business, was generating roughly $220 billion in revenue in 2022 alone.
That is just an insane number.
It is. It is one of the most consistently profitable products in human history.
And from a business perspective, the beauty of that search engine is how frictionless the revenue model is, You, the user, have a question, you type it in, Google gives you a list of blue links. You click on one of those links, and somewhere in that split-second transaction, Google gets paid through advertising. It's this massive self-sustaining money-printing machine.
But then ChatGPT arrives and threatens to just short-circuit that entire behavior loop because it introduced something not just different, but much more satisfying for the user.
How so?
Well, instead of handing you a list of links that you have to sift through, read, and mentally synthesize yourself, a conversational AI does the synthesis for you. It just gives you the direct answer immediately in plain English.
Which means no clicking.
No clicking.
Yeah.
And if there is no clicking, the foundational pillar of that $220 billion revenue model suddenly starts to crumble.
Wow.
Yeah, for the first time in 2 decades, Google's core business faced a genuine existential threat.
The leaked memos actually officially describe the internal alarm at Google as a code red. And massive tech monopolies do not use terms like code red unless the walls are visibly shaking.
No, they definitely don't.
So they hit the panic button. They decided they had to accelerate the deployment of their own conversational AI, Bard, which was built on their internal language model called LaMDA. And they just rushed it out the door in February 2023.
It was a highly publicized launch and a very public stumble.
Let's talk about that promotional video they put out, because they released this flashy demo to show off how smart Bard is. Someone asked the AI what new discoveries the James Webb Space Telescope had made.
Right, the exoplanet thing.
Yeah. Bard confidently spits out an answer, but it includes a totally factual error, claiming the telescope took the very first images of an exoplanet.
What's fascinating here is how violently the market reacted to a single, localized hallucination. Astronomers caught the factual error within hours of the video going live.
And it just went completely viral across social media.
It did. And the financial reports showed that this one isolated mistake wiped $100 billion off Google's market value in a single trading day.
$100 billion over an exoplanet trivia mistake. I mean, it sounds almost absurd, but it highlights exactly why they kept that warp drive in the garage for so long.
Exactly. This incident proved that moving fast with generative AI carried incredibly expensive risks. The technology hallucinates, it fabricates information with total confidence.
You're right.
But the core tension of this entire arms race is that moving slowly carried a completely different, potentially fatal set of risks. Google was trapped in an impossible position.
If they moved too fast, they released something imperfect and destroyed their reputation as the world's trusted information engine.
Yeah. And if they moved too cautiously, they ceded the future of the internet to their competitors.
So they were paralyzed by having too much to lose. But while Google was sweating over protecting their search monopoly, their biggest historical rival was in a completely different boat.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's look at the corporate strategy documents from Microsoft, because their positioning in this race is wild. For a long time, Microsoft had this prevailing reputation as like the slow legacy enterprise company.
Yeah, the boring office software guys.
Right. They completely missed the smartphone revolution. They missed social media. They were late to huge chunks of the cloud computing revolution.
A lot of industry observers view them as an aging giant whose most innovative days were behind them. But they made an investment in a relatively small startup called OpenAI.
Which seemed kind of crazy at the time.
It did. Throwing billions of dollars at an unproven AI research lab seemed really eccentric to the broader market. People thought it was a very expensive side project. But practically overnight, that investment revealed itself to be one of the sharpest strategic bets in modern corporate history.
Because they didn't just invest, they aggressively weaponized the technology.
Right.
Within just months of ChatGPT launching, Microsoft integrated this AI into the absolute fabric of their software empire.
They called it Copilot.
Right. They deployed it simultaneously across Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, GitHub, and their Azure cloud platform. They basically turned their entire suite of Office tools into intelligent agents.
The most aggressive and direct attack, however, was what they did with search. Microsoft integrated a cutting-edge conversational model into Bing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because let's be honest, Bing had been an industry joke for a decade.
Yeah.
It had, less than a 3% market share?
Roughly, yeah.
It was the search engine you only used if you couldn't figure out how to change your browser defaults. But suddenly, by adding a GPT-4 interface, Bing had a massive glaring capability that Google did not offer.
Which is why the usage numbers skyrocketed.
Hey, I have to push back on this. I'm looking at the numbers and I understand the narrative, but you're telling me they just slapped a chatbot interface onto a struggling search engine, and that was actually enough to threaten a monopoly as entrenched as Google?
Well, it wasn't just a slap-on feature, and that is the crucial distinction here. Integrating a large language model changed the fundamental utility of the search engine.
Okay, how so?
They turned Bing from a simple directory of links into a reasoning engine. You could ask it to compare two coffee makers, synthesize the reviews, and format the pros and cons into a table, all right there on the search page.
Ah, I see.
That fundamental shift in user experience is why the data shows Bing saw a 30% jump in daily active users in just weeks.
30% for a stagnant, decade-old product. That is crazy.
Yes. For a product that had been completely written off, that kind of growth is a seismic event. It proved to every executive watching that AI was the ultimate market disruptor. It could breathe life into a dead product and break a monopoly simultaneously.
So you have Microsoft and Google, these two absolute titans, fiercely fighting to build the ultimate proprietary walled garden of AI. They want you to use their interface, pay their monthly subscription, and just stay locked in their ecosystem.
Right.
But while they're building these massive walls, another tech giant decides the best strategy is to just blow the walls up entirely. The memos from Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, detail a radically different approach.
Radically different. Instead of building a closed system and charging developers a toll for access, Meta took their incredibly powerful large language models and gave them away as open source software.
They released Llama in early 2023, and then Llama 2 a few months later. Anyone could download the code, study it, modify it, and build companies on top of it.
Yep, completely free.
If you're listening to this and wondering why a notoriously competitive tech company would just hand away billions of dollars in research and development for free, you're not alone. What is the actual business play there?
Well, the internal logic outlines a two-pronged strategy by Mark Zuckerberg. First, there's the philosophical security argument. They argue that open-source AI is inherently safer.
Safer. How?
Because if you keep a model closed behind a corporate firewall, you only have a few dozen internal engineers looking for flaws. If you open source it, you have tens of thousands of independent developers worldwide stress testing the code and identifying vulnerabilities. It's crowdsourced security.
Okay, that makes sense for the PR side, but Meta is a ruthless business. There has to be a strategic, competitive angle.
Oh, absolutely. The strategic angle is all about ecosystem control and commoditizing the competition. If Meta gives away the foundation for free, every startup and researcher in the world starts building their applications on top of Meta's models.
Right, so they become the default.
Exactly. Meta dictates the technical standards of the new internet. Furthermore, by making highly capable AI free, it severely undercuts Google and Microsoft's ability to charge a massive premium for their closed models.
Oh, wow.
It forces the competition back into areas where Meta is already dominant, like social media and consumer hardware.
And the fallout from that open source rebellion was immediate. The white papers note that within weeks of Llama's release, independent developers had figured out how to adapt these massive models to run locally on standard consumer laptops.
Which totally decentralized the entire power dynamic.
Why?
Startups suddenly didn't have to pay massive corporate API fees to build sophisticated AI products.
And researchers could study frontier models without asking a corporation for permission.
Right. It broke the monopoly on access.
Which brings us to another fascinating player in the source material, Anthropic. They are a startup founded by a group of former OpenAI executives who left to build their own vision.
And their specific lane was to brand themselves heavily as the safety-focused alternative. They looked at a market that felt incredibly reckless and decided to sell responsibility.
So they built an AI assistant named Claude. And the white papers detail a training concept they call constitutional AI. But what does that actually mean in practice? How do you give computer code a constitution?
It's a really fascinating mechanism. Instead of relying purely on human testers to constantly correct the AI, which is slow and expensive, they give the neural network a rigid set of core principles, a constitution. During the training phase, the AI generates a response, and then a secondary system evaluates that response against the constitution. If the response violates a rule, say it's biased or provides instructions for something dangerous, the system forces the model to rewrite its own answer until it complies.
So it automates the safety alignment.
Exactly.
And leaning hard into that safety mechanism worked flawlessly from a business perspective. In 2023, Amazon looked at Anthropic's approach and handed them a $4 billion investment.
A huge deal.
Yeah, it gave Anthropic the massive computing resources they needed to actually compete with OpenAI, and it gave Amazon a major stake in the race.
The scale of capital being deployed during this window is almost incomprehensible. Microsoft committing $13 billion to OpenAI, Amazon, and Google pouring billions into Anthropic. We are looking at budgets that rival the GDP of small nations.
Which perfectly sets up the next crucial layer of this deep dive, because all of these multi-billion-dollar software bets, all these complex language models, they do not run on magic.
No, they do not.
They require immense, mind-boggling amounts of physical hardware. You need compute. And the financial reports in our stack show one hardware company going absolutely supernova to supply it. NVIDIA.
Yep, the ultimate winner of the gold rush.
I need you to explain this to me, because for years I just associated NVIDIA with high-end video games. Why did they suddenly become the center of the technological universe?
To understand that, you have to look at the difference between a traditional CPU and a GPU, which is what NVIDIA makes. A standard CPU in your laptop is like a single brilliant mathematics professor.
Okay.
It can solve incredibly complex problems, but it solves them one at a time, sequentially. A GPU, on the other hand, is like an army of 10,000 middle schoolers. They might only be doing basic arithmetic, but they're all doing it at exactly the same time.
And artificial intelligence requires the army.
Precisely. Training an AI model involves billions of tiny mathematical calculations, matrix multiplications, that need to happen simultaneously. NVIDIA's GPUs are the only engines truly capable of handling that parallel processing at scale.
So you literally cannot build a frontier AI model without them.
You really can't.
Which explains the staggering financial math here. At the start of 2023, NVIDIA's market value was around $300 billion. By 2024, they had rocketed past $3 trillion. They briefly became the most valuable company in the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that explosion in physical hardware value is where this stops being just a corporate competition and morphs into a matter of global statecraft.
It becomes geopolitical.
Yes. The hardware powering these systems is no longer viewed as just a tech component. It is heavily classified as a strategic national asset.
And the United States government recognized that shift instantly. They looked at the geopolitical landscape and enacted severe export restrictions, heavily limiting the sale of advanced NVIDIA chips to China.
The goal was to starve the Chinese tech sector of the raw compute power needed to train massive models, thereby maintaining an American edge.
But history shows us that introducing trade restrictions into an arms race often triggers fierce unintended consequences, because China didn't just fold up shop.
Not at all.
The reports outline how Chinese tech giants like Baidu, Alibaba, and a startup called DeepSeek massively accelerated their domestic development. And this leads to an incredibly dramatic moment in early 2025.
The DeepSeek breakthrough.
Right. DeepSeek releases a new AI model that essentially matches the performance of the leading American models. But the real shock was the efficiency. They built it and ran it at a fraction of the hardware cost. It tanked AI-related stock prices in the U.S. across the board.
It completely upended the assumptions about hardware moats.
But looking at the timeline of the U.S. restrictions and DeepSeek's breakthrough, I have to ask, by trying to starve China of raw hardware compute power, did the U.S. accidentally force the Chinese ecosystem to become radically more efficient at software architecture?
It is a textbook example of constraint driving innovation.
Uh-huh.
When you have unlimited hardware, you can afford to write sloppy brute force code.
Right.
But when you are starved of raw computing power, you are forced to optimize. You have to invent leaner architectures and squeeze every possible drop of performance out of the older chips you do have.
It's like telling an engineering team they aren't allowed to use a massive V8 engine anymore, so they retreat into the lab and invent a hybrid motor that gets the exact same horsepower using half the fuel.
That's exactly what happened. And by forcing that efficiency, the landscape became infinitely more complex for the U.S. to navigate.
So what does this all mean? We've traced the billions of dollars, the open source battles, the hardware limitations, and the geopolitical chess moves. But reading through the white papers and the commentary from the researchers actually building these tools, there is a very palpable undercurrent of anxiety. What is the actual underlying cost of all this speed?
Well, the anxiety stems from the deeply misaligned incentives that an arms race inherently creates. When competitors are locked in a dead heat, the overwhelming structural incentive is to move fast.
Right.
You have to deploy the product first, capture the user base, and figure out the bugs later.
The classic Silicon Valley move fast and break things mantra.
Yes. But when you are dealing with advanced artificial intelligence, breaking things has a very different fallout than, say, a glitch in a photo sharing app. The commercial pressure forces companies to prioritize capability over safety.
Why is that?
Because capability is obvious and profitable. An AI that can instantly write flawless code, generate photorealistic video, or analyze a 100-page legal brief that wins customers and drives up the stock price.
And safety.
Safety issues are often latent. They don't show up in the promotional video. A capability bug means the AI fails to answer your question.
Right.
A safety bug means the AI subtly manipulates a user or provides a bad actor with the exact chemical formula for a biological weapon. But you might not discover that vulnerability until the model has already been deployed to 100 million people.
And that's why prominent AI researchers started publicly sounding the alarm. The documentation shows widespread warnings that the industry was actively cutting corners on rigorous safety evaluations just to beat out the next competitor's launch cycle.
It's the terrifying logic of the race. Even if a CEO genuinely wants to slow down, ensure the guardrails are perfect, and prioritize safety, the market structure won't let them.
Because someone else will just jump ahead.
Exactly. If they slow down, their competitor releases a model, steals the market share, and dictates the future anyway. The structure forces everyone to run at maximum speed, regardless of the blind corners ahead.
But the flip side, and the source material makes this undeniably clear, is that this cutthroat pressure drove miraculous, unbelievable progress. Models that would have seemed like impossible science fiction in 2020 were considered totally routine by 2023. The compression of innovation is staggering.
We haven't seen a pace of improvement like this since the very early Wild West days of the internet.
And that brings us to the end of today's deep dive. We've tracked the domino effect from Google's $100 billion mistake with Bard to Microsoft turning a struggling search engine into a reasoning machine.
It's been quite a journey.
We've unpacked Meta's open-source strategy to blow up the walled gardens, Anthropic's multi-billion-dollar bet on a constitutional AI, NVIDIA's historic rise on the back of GPUs, and the geopolitical fallout of restricting that hardware.
The core takeaway from synthesizing all these documents is that we are living through a singular moment in history. The world's largest, most powerful companies are betting their entire corporate futures on one rapidly evolving technology.
And governments are treating it as a matter of urgent national security.
Exactly. The AI arms race is not a metaphor. It is the defining competition of our era. And the most sobering realization is that we are still just in the opening chapters.
It is active.